manual transmission car. So we are in the Z4M Roadster, the 2006 Z4M Roadster, and this uses a 6-speed manual. And it's pretty bare bones, pretty Spartan, but I will go over really how do you get started and how do you drive and maximize the use of this car. So when you're starting off with a manual, you have to think a little bit differently from a normal car. So with a manual transmission, actually with any car, you've got an engine, right? The engine is creating power, it's spinning very quickly, and you have a transmission. So you need a way to connect the spinning power of the engine and transmit that to the wheels. And so there's this component called a clutch that basically acts as a connection point between the engine that's always spinning and the wheels, which sometimes, like right now, they may not be moving. And it basically provides a way for you to transmit that power without breaking anything. That being said, you can very easily do a lot of expensive damage to your car if you're not careful, and you can also injure yourself. So I'm going to try to go through some of the basic principles of driving a stick shift, and hopefully it will make sense. If not, you can leave a comment below. But alas, to get started, one thing to note is that when you're in park, there is no park. Unlike a conventional automatic, you just have a stick here. And this controls your gears. So right now the car is off. I'm in first gear. It's just a habit. I generally keep the car in gear after I shut off the engine, just in case the emergency brake, for whatever reason, becomes disengaged. The car will be less likely to roll back. In fact, it probably won't move because the car's in gear, meaning that you've got a mechanical connection between the flywheel, the engine, and the transmission and the tires. So if the engine's not moving, those tires ain't going anywhere. So what you do is, so when you get started, let's just go over the shift. So this is a 6-speed. You've got reverse all the way to the left and up. You've got first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So again, the car is off, but if you want to show the motion, this reverse is all the way to the left and then up. That's reverse, like that. And then first gear is to the left, up. Second is down. Same sort of left on these first two, this first row in these 3 rows of gears. And then third rather is straight up. Fourth is straight down. Fifth is up and to the right. Sixth is down and to the right. And you can kind of feel, although it's not a gated shifter, you can still feel the notches. And it just takes practice, right? I mean, you obviously you want to stay at a low speed when you're first starting out. You really don't want to misshift, especially in this car. But you'll get a sense of the gears. I mean, it generally takes more movement than you're probably used to. But that's just the way it is. And this is it's a bit of a performance car, so it may be a little bit more notchy. But that's essentially how you shift. Now, when you're shifting, you always have to make sure that you're not going to see it here, but there's a clutch on the bottom. So you've got 3 pedals. You have the clutch on the left, brake, and gas. And when you're shifting, you always want to make sure that you push the clutch all the way in to the floor, all the way in. You never want to only push the clutch in a little bit or ride the clutch or any of that. You either want to have it in, all the way in, or all the way out. The only time when you're feathering the clutch is if you're starting off on a, from 0 miles an hour. That's really the only time where you're going to feather the clutch. Then the brake, and obviously you've got your accelerator. So when the car is started, and we'll do it in a second, what you want to do to get started, obviously you want to check your mirrors, check your blind spots, make sure there's no one around you. You're going to put the car into first gear. And to do that, you're going to, with your foot on the brake, you're going to control the the brake of the car, you're going to release the emergency brake. You're going to put this down. I'm not going to do it now because I'm going to roll back. But you can put this down, and then you're going to put your foot all the way in the clutch, and then you're going to put your hand on the stick shift, and then you're going to put it in first gear all the way up, and then you're going to give it a little bit of throttle and slowly release the clutch until you feel that the point at which the car starts to move. That's called the friction point on the clutch. And really what's happening is that clutch, it's essentially a big brake, and it's making contact with the other part of the clutch that's going to cause it to lock. And so when it locks, your engine speed is going to match the speed of the input shaft of the transmission, and through the first gear it's going to start to make the car move. You're not going to be going fast, but because it's geared very low. So it's a lot to take in, but let me demonstrate that to you in real time. So let's get this mounted here. Okay, and you're not going to be able to see it, but so car's in neutral. I've got the emergency brake on. Help if I had the key in the ignition. So key in the ignition here. You're going to put it on. Push the clutch all the way in, because in a manual car you have to have the clutch in to start it. And then you turn one click, it's sort of on, and then just one more click to start it. There you go. Release it when the engine starts, when it catches. And then I'm going to put my foot off the clutch, and if you noticed, the RPMs dip just a little bit for a second, and that's, the clutch has disengaged, and so the engine is spinning with the transmission, but because you're not in gear, you're not going anywhere. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into first gear. So what I want to do, now I'm parked, I want to put my foot on the brake, I want to pull up and release the emergency brake, put that down. So now I can move forward. Now, if I took my foot off the brake, what's going to happen? Well, for now, nothing, because I'm parked on a slope. This car has hill hold technology, which means it's going to hold the brake until I move. But normally you would roll forward or backwards, and it's going to feel kind of weird at first, but you got to get used to it. It takes a little while, but for the most part, just keep your foot on the brake, right, until you're ready to shift. Now we're ready to go. And so what I'm going to do, it's a little hot in here, what I'm going to do is adjust the temperature, get some air going in, and I'm going to put my foot all the way down the clutch to engage the clutch fully. My foot's on the floor on the clutch. I'm going to take my hand, move it to the right, put the car in first gear. Now I'm going to, while I'm letting off the brake, I'm going to slowly let off the clutch and slowly give it a little more gas, and then they start moving, and now you're driving. So now I'm driving along in first gear. One thing that you have to remember is that each gear has a certain speed that's optimal for that gear. So in first gear, I'm going 5 miles an hour. You have to look at your tachometer, right? Because you don't want to be, revving the car at a red line in first gear. That's not, you're not going to, it's not good for the car, and you're not really going to get anywhere. So you have to keep that in mind. Each gear has a certain ratio, and each ratio has a certain ideal speed that you need to be in. And for first gear, that ideal speed, let's just go up here, the ideal speed is probably, anywhere from 5 to, 25 miles per hour. Maybe 5 to 20 miles an hour. You see, I'm going at maybe 10, 15 miles an hour, and I'm already at 2,500 RPM. So now, if you want to shift, let's talk about shifting. So we're going to want to shift, and so when I shift, again, what you want to do is, now my foot's on the gas, or it doesn't have to be, but it's on there now. Foot's on the gas. I'm going to let off the gas, and at the same time, I'm going to push down the clutch all the way to the floor, right? All the way to the floor, and I'm going to take the gear lever from first, and I'm going to drop it to second. All right, so all the way to the floor, second, and I'm going to let it go. And you got to do it pretty quickly, otherwise the car is it's gonna buck. So I did it fairly quickly, and car car's all the way. Now it's in second gear. All right. So I'm gonna go around. I'm just gonna go around here. I'm in second gear, and you notice the RPMs now are a little bit lower. Right. That's because I'm in a higher gear. So this allows me to go a little bit faster, you know, but I don't have as much torque from the engine. And this will really manifest itself at higher highway speeds. But really, that's sort of the gist of it. You know, it's hard to just explain it and not actually do it. So, you know, really the key to learning to drive a stick is to get behind the wheel. So the other thing to notice is knowing how to come to a stop. Now right now, I'm just coasting, and I could probably just coast, and the car will just keep running under the engine's power. Right? My foot's off the gas, and the car's just going. But, you know, when you come to a stop, like for example here, we're coming to a stop, what you want to do is put the brake in, and then push the clutch in all the way, you know, when the car comes to, you know, about 10 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour. If you wait too long, you're going to stall out the car, right? Because the engine doesn't have enough power at those low speeds to overcome the weight of the car. So we're going to go around again, and let's demonstrate just general shifting. Trying to think about how to explain it. It's actually a lot harder than people make out. And once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. I think the best thing to do is just practice. You know, expect to stall out a couple times. You know, expect to look a little foolish. But that's all part of learning. It's just, you know, you want to do it in a big open parking lot where there's no other cars and you're not in danger to yourself or other people. But the other thing I want to talk about now is, so we talked about starting, we talked about some of the basics of the shifting. I want to talk about shift points, and this will be the last point in this video, so it doesn't get too long. I'll try to make a better one. But shift points are important because, again, you want to optimize the RPM range depending on the type of driving that you're about to be doing. So we are going to get on the highway in a little bit, and I'm gonna probably want to be in 6th gear. You know, with this car, you know, it's geared fairly short, which means that your gears don't take you as far in terms of your speed. So you know, 1st, 2nd, 3rd gear, you could go through 1st, 2nd, 3rd gear and still only be at 40 miles an hour, right? So right now, you know, I'm just sort of driving around this parking area, and 1st gear, 2nd gear, and then 3rd gear if this guy can do, and then 3rd gear. I'd use 3rd gear. But really, you don't need to use that many gears here. So another thing, if you just noticed what happened, because I was watching this other car, you need to know when to let off the clutch, and you have to do it so the car doesn't jerk. And with this car, it can be a little tricky. But generally, you kind of, it's hard to explain, you just have to get a feel for it. You want to let it off almost at the same time as you are letting off the accelerator. You see now at this, I'm coming down to a stop, my foot is in, the clutch is in all the way, and I'm in neutral. I keep the car in neutral. You probably shouldn't keep the car in gear when you're at a stop, just because it's, I don't know. I don't have a good reason for it. I like to bring it back to neutral because you never know what gear you're going to need. Usually when you start off like this, you start in 1st gear. If you're starting from a slow crawl, you know, you could start in 2nd gear. But when you're at a stop, you usually want to stop at 1st gear. Now, I'm going to show you sort of rowing through the gears here a little bit. Now I'm in 1st gear because I know I'm going to move very soon. And so now I've got the car in 1st gear, and I'm just holding the clutch all the way to the floor, waiting for these cars to pass, right? And then I'm slowly letting off the clutch. First gear, 3,000 RPM, second gear, and I'm shifting at about 3,200 RPM, right? Which is pretty leisurely. Depending on the car, this car, you know, it likes to shift to higher, or this car likes to rev. Other cars, you know, you may shift to 2,500. Usually 3,000 is pretty good. So now I'm in fourth gear, and I'm accelerating on the on-ramp. And the same when you're accelerating, you're just gonna shift like you did when you're at lower speeds. It's just a little bit smoother. Now I'm in fifth gear, and I'm gonna drop it down to sixth and just cruise on the highway. Right? So now I'm cruising on the highway in sixth gear. Now, another thing to know, and this is a bit more advanced, but when you want to drop down a gear, let's say you want to pass someone, and you'll notice if I want to accelerate, you know, I don't have as much power, right? So because the engine's on its power band. Sixth gear is usually for fuel economy. You know, first through third gear it's for acceleration. You know, fourth through sixth is more for economy. You know, if I really wanted to accelerate, I would need to drop it down a gear. And to drop it down a gear, you just can't push it in the gear. You actually have to engage the clutch, shift, and then disengage the clutch. But if you do it, the car's it's gonna buck because the engine's spinning at one speed and the transmission's spinning at another. So you have to match them. And so there's a technique that you know, race car drivers use. It's called rev matching, and it just makes for a more seamless transition from a higher gear to a lower gear. So to rev match, you want to downshift a gear, and after you push in the clutch all the way, you're going to blip the throttle such that you're matching the engine speed with the transmission speed at that particular gear. So I'm going to downshift to fifth gear. Clutch in, I blip the throttle in fifth gear. Fourth gear, same thing. Third, now I have more power. So that's the essence of it, and I think again, that's something that takes practice. You're probably not going to get it right off the bat, but it's actually a lot of fun when you get good at it. And then there's an even more advanced version of it called heel toe, which is where you're rev matching your downshifts on braking. You know, I can't do it that well because of my height and my foot size, but it's good because you can just you can downshift through a braking zone, and you won't destabilize the car if you don't rev match your downshifts. But anyway, that's the basics of shifting, and you know, I'll try to make a better video in the future, but for now I just wanted to show you sort of how it works. Alright, thanks.